were to him. The ghost, that's the Father, and you may happily live on earth, forgiven by heaven. Go before me where your uncle sat. This throne was made but for you. And then Hamlet ascends the throne, looking admiringly at his father, and then we hear a lot of jubilation and happiness coming from the asides of the theatre. Right? So that's a radical change in terms of the plot. We have radical change in terms of the genre itself. Shakespeare gives us a tragedy. Tragic art will give us a musical melodrama, right? A lot of singing in it. It's kind of melodramatic, and we know of the minor distinctions between the melodrama and the tragedy. You can see that in the monologues, the soliloquies. The tragic sense in Shakespeare's text is enhanced, promoted, and heightened and underlined in these segments of the text we call the soliloquies, the monologues. Because in the soliloquy, it's all about this tension between two persona. It's about this tension between the private and the public. Hamlet has suspicions of his mother, has suspicions of his uncle. He's struggling to show these suspicions openly in public, so we have some tension between the private and the public. And this tension affects his language. When you read the monologues, you'll find a lot of pauses, a lot of question marks, a lot of exclamation marks, a lot of dots, silences, things like that. So it's quite disruptive, this thought. It's not overflowing, it's not continuous. Unlike what we have in the Arabic version. Arabic version is quite declamatory, versified. It looks like it was meant to be lyrics for singing. So all of the distorted sentences, they disappear. We have full, complete, meaningful sentences. So we lose this tragic sense. We don't have this tension between private and public. So we do have a crisis here, to use a term from science problem theory. This is something which is incomprehensible to us. This is something that goes against our understanding and expectation of what translation is. We have always thought about translation in terms of these two key words, faithfulness and fidelity. We don't have either here. So to use this term, this is a crisis, this is incomprehensible. I would like to go to a quote from Edward Said, which helps me a lot in trying to develop this crisis of interpretation, this crisis of intelligibility, to move it into something positive. And Said here comments on the work of George Lukács, especially in connection with Lukács's interest in what he calls the reified mind of scholars. Scholars and academics who are mainly interested only in the fragmentary facts, in the bits and pieces. They are only interested in gathering facts without trying to locate these facts in a socio-cultural background. Academics and scholars who have lost the vision of the totality of socio-cultural phenomena. And this is what he says here, and I find that quite interesting. When instead of an explicable, and he gives a very, very interesting example, the example of a social phenomenon. Imagine for a second that there's a shortage of beds. We're running out of beds. For the empiricist academic, the focus will be on the crisis, on the problem. We're running out of beds. But for another scholar, he will try to locate this crisis, this problem. He will try to put it in a context that can help him or her to make sense of the crisis, to make it intelligible. So Said says here, when instead of an inexplicable shortage of bread, you can imagine the human world. I like that. And subsequently the human beings who could use the bread, but are no longer doing so because there is a baker's strike. Trying to contextualize now. You are well on your way to knowing that crisis is comprehensible, because process is comprehensible. The two key words in this quote for me is human work and process. And that is why the whole project of Bourdieu's sociology is quite useful to me in understanding these fragments, these crises. The crisis of an unfaithful translation, a case like cannot be fully appreciated unless you incorporate human agency and the historical process, where does it come from? How does it evolve? What is the background? So that's a very interesting quote here. Another quote from the same article, and it is again about critiquing this empirical mindset, the mindset which focuses only on the fragments, on the mere facts. The rational forms of understanding, therefore, cannot cope with the irrationality of physical domain, the facts. And when efforts are made to compel the facts to submit to system, the fragmentation and endlessly atomized awareness, quite dense language of Simon, either destroy the system or turn the mind into a passive register of discrete objects. Yeah. And these are the risks of using an empiricist approach when it comes to mainly socio-cultural phenomena like translation. When you approach them with a system of thought with a model, and you try to make the facts on the ground, subscribe to this model, you try to box the facts into the model, you have one of two risks. Either the system is proved wrong, it collapses. The model of thought collapses, it doesn't work, it doesn't prove to be useful. Or the mind of the scholar, the mind of the researcher becomes obsessed with the fragments. Yeah, becomes obsessed with the language without seeing what lies behind the language. Does it make sense?
Of course it makes.
Thank you. Right. Now, that's an example of an academic who embraces this empiricist mindset, just looking at the fragments. And when you look at the fragments, you will have value judgments like this one. And that's quite recent, relatively, 2000. Abbott's translation of Hamlet is considered an awkward translation, marked by such deviations from the source text that it ends up offering only a ghostly resemblance of the original. We're just obsessed about the language of the translation and the original. The end result is something as not helpful as that. It's all about issuing a value judgment about the translation. Right, solution. Now I'm taking these two key words from Said, the human labor, human agency, and the historical process. And I think this links up quite nicely with the work of Bourdieu. If I am to sum up the whole of Bourdieu's sociological thinking, it's all about incorporating human agency and the socio-cultural context, the socio-cultural process, in the understanding of social phenomena. If you want to understand this sort of phenomena, it's all about human agency and the context. The work of Bourdieu is quite useful in the sense that it focuses a lot on this idea of contextualization, contextualizing a cultural program. And Bourdieu talks about multiple levels of contextualization. First one has to do with looking at the cultural code, whether it is translation or a piece of literature, in the context of the social structure, the society, where and when it was produced. So look at the social structure, look at the power relations, all of these things you need to be aware of as a sociologist of culture. But the second level, which is quite unique to Bourdieu, is this idea of the field. And I thank you so much, Professor Bahar, for mentioning this idea of refraction rather than reflection. Because if he ended up only focusing on the impact of society on translation, you will again end up with very simplistic interpretations of translations which try to establish a link between what we see in the translation and what goes on in the society. Right? So we can very simply talk about Marxist translation, feminist translation, which is again quite simplistic. But Bourdieu tells us here about another level of contextualization, which is the professional level. And that's what he calls the field. This is the smaller circle, the smaller professional social space which involves other translators, publishers, theater managers who have an interest in translating drama. Yeah? And that's why any influence coming from the social space, coming from the society, when it gets into the smaller circle, it is not reflected, it gets refracted. It is adapted and it does change. So we can't think about this simplistic idea of reflection. It's not a matter of reflection, it's a matter of reflection. Another level of contextualization, Bourdieu talks about the idea of homology. If you want to understand grammar translation, especially in late 19th century Egypt, early 20th century, you need to establish the links between this field of activity we call grammar translation and other fields of activity. Yeah? You need to think about popular culture. We just mentioned singing, Salam Ahgazi. We need to talk about that. We need to look at that. We need to think about literary translation, the translation of fiction. Because there are influences. You can see homologies, intersections, interconnections. You need to consider that. Right, I'm moving now into another case. Of course, if you take all of these nice ideas and try to apply them to the case of Dr.Sameh, you will come up with a reading that is totally different from the kind of readings we have seen, describing it as an awkward representation of Shakespeare. If you locate it against the backdrop of social space, the field of grammar translation, if you establish the links between it and popular culture, literary translation, you can see the links. It does make sense. The crisis is intelligible here. I want to move now into the second generation of Shakespeare translators and see how we can use Bourdieu's work to understand what was going on. Bourdieu likes to talk about this idea of conflict. He said that if you want to understand the behavior of culture producers, by the way, Bourdieu did not talk about translation, apart from one single article. He didn't talk much about translation, but he talks about culture producers. And he says that if you want to understand the behavior, you need to think about conflict, struggles between them. We are involved in a conflict over capital. This capital might be financial, if you want to sell the products, and this capital might be symbolic or cultural. People who want the writings to be anthologized, canonized, acknowledged. People who want the translations to be taught at schools. People who want translations to receive awards, things like that. So, when we move into the second generation, the field of grammar translation grows. We have some expansion now. We have some newcomers. New generations of translators join in this activity. And that's why, starting from 1910, 1909, we start to see some kind of tension between these groups. The first generation was mainly interested in commercialization, making money out of Shakespeare, and introducing a new genre, a new art form which is not known to the Egyptians. Second generation was different. They were not so much interested in financial capital. They had a lot of interest in accumulating cultural symbolic capital. And that's why we have what I would call attention between profit-oriented and prestige-oriented translators. We also have attention between established translators, people like Dr.Sameh. By 1910, he was quite known. This is the man who would make money out of the box office if you want to translate drama. I knew this man. So he was so established at the time. So we have some tension between young translators coming into the field and established people like this one. We have also some structural changes in the field. We have a change that is connected to the background of the translators who started translating Shakespeare from 1910, and most of them, unlike the first generation, they are financially independent. First generation, they were mostly freelancers coming from the Levant. They have language skills, they want to survive, they want to have a life. And they were basically commissioned and hired by theatre managers, and that's why they were quite willing to make compromises. When Salam Ahgazi tells Dr.Sameh, well, I don't like the way you have phrased this monologue, please change it to make it singable, he would do that. I'm not happy with the ending because this would not attract audience, please change it. He was so happy to do that. But starting from 1910, 1911, 1912, we have people who were financially independent, which means they were not willing to make compromises, no compromises. Also, publication started to be an option if you want to disseminate it for translation. It's not only about staging this version, it's about publishing it, which again helps translators to make the own decisions without any pressures coming from theatre managers. Also, we start to see some attempts by the new generation to try to distinguish the old cultural products vis-a-vis the products of the previous generation. And here I find the paratextual elements, the front covers, the verbs, the footnotes, they are quite interesting in showing this tension between these two generations. So for example, that's a front cover of another translation of Macbeth, 1911. And again, from reading the front cover, you can see this tension. Yeah? So for the first time, we have a translation which is done directly from English. All of the first generation, they were all francophone. They did not have English as foreign language. So they had to translate through the French. But this man was quite keen to make it clear on the front cover that his product is quite fresh. It's coming directly from Shakespeare. Leave Shakespeare أشهر شعراء الإنجليز. And then down the line, أغربها منظومة عن اللغة الإنجليزية, translated directly from English. Yeah? So he's selling that. That's a selling point. We still have some features remaining from the first generation. We're still talking about Shakespeare as the poet, rather than the dramatist. Something absolutely interesting here, which was a crucial change in the history of Shakespeare translation in Arabic. And this is about the idea of the kind of audience translators of Shakespeare target. Tarius Abdu, all he had in mind is the low middle class Egyptians who could afford to pay the ticket to see Hamlet on the stage. If you see the dedication here, what does this man say? تعريفنا يهدى لكل العالم. And then he makes a reserved statement. It's not actually the whole word. Yeah? من كاتب أو شاعر أو عالم. So that's a version which is targeted at the elite, at the intellectuals. It's not meant to be consumed by the low middle class civil educated Egyptians. So that's a big change, which started to emerge in the 1911, 1912. Also, he takes pride, he shows off his social capital, and not like this bunch of losers, the presentation. We used to make money out of translation. Independent, connected to high-profile people like the Minister of Foreign Affairs, things like that. So, showing off his social capital. You can see that. That's the gloss. Right. Another strategy of distinction is people try to distinguish themselves. And that is, they try to tell the consumers, maybe readers in this case, that the translations have another function to play apart from communicating the foreign text. Yeah? The translation is not about commercializing, it's not about making profit, but these translations are meant to play a political role, a very noble role. These translations are about adopting a cause. We are translating because we do have a cause. That's the case of Julius Caesar, translated in 1911. Front cover is interesting, I couldn't reproduce it, it's pretty worn out, but we do have another indication. Translator says, Muhammad Hamdi, هذه الترجمة مهداة إلى كل الشعوب الطامحة إلى الاستقلال. Yeah, so underline the word istiqlal, quite interesting. And then when you turn over the page, in an inside page you have a Shakespearean bust picture, and underneath it we have this very, very interesting description. How does he describe Shakespeare? He still talks about the shag, about the poet, talks about the ruwa'i, which stands for the playwright, but he has a very interesting word to add to the description, which is democratic writer. Yeah? And that's interesting. Yes, it strikes you as a historian. What does he want to say like that? Yeah? Again, if you keep that in a context, I'm talking about 1912, it was under British occupation. We're talking about a political arena which was hijacked by the British and by the king. Yeah? So highlighting democracy was something important. The very act of selecting Julius Caesar for translation is itself an act of political activism. Yeah? Because the whole place is about, as you will know, assassinating the ruler. It's all about resistance, insurgency, things like that. Right. So we have differences now. We can see these differences. And as I said, we cannot appreciate these differences without looking at the field, social space, and human agency. Now let me say a few words. How are we doing with this time?
5 minutes, okay?
5 minutes. Oh my goodness. Fine. Contrast case, obviously I don't have much time to talk about that. It is a very, very interesting case. Okay. So that's 1912.
15 minutes. Yes, you are here and more.
Okay.
Please.
You're so kind. Very kind audience.
Very interested.
So 1912, Khalil Gibran. Again, we do have some interesting things going on which cannot be understood without looking at the context. For the very first time in the history of translation, let alone Shakespeare translation in Egypt, we do have a translator commenting on his own performance. So for the very first time, we do have a translator writing an introduction to the translation. And for me, this document is one of the most important documents in the history of Arabic translation. Very small text, quite interesting for a number of things. Because you can see where the history changed and why it changed. He talks about his choice of classical Arabic, and again, he's trying to distinguish himself from the cultural product of the previous generation. Previous generation, they tried to make sure that the language of the text is quite accessible, so it was neither Armenia nor Fusha, it's something in between, something closer to what Dr. Hakim talked about later as the third language, in the West Delta. For Khalil Gibran, the story was different. He said that I'm quite keen on, quite intent on making use of classical Arabic. He even described it as the Greek Islamic Arabic. I'm going for Arabic Jahili. He made that quite clear. And he did have his political reasons for that, we'll be talking about that. The whole of the choice of classical Arabic as the language of translation was justified on political grounds in the translation. This is a very heavily political piece, Gibran's introduction to this translation. Just a few words from the introduction. This is my back translation. Sometimes he uses very, very aggressive language. We're talking about how the vernaculars, how the Arabic vernaculars were used to fragment the Arab nations, to disunite them. So he says, Tallahi, by God, if I could put my hands on the vernacular, I would have killed it unremorsefully. And this I would have done in revenge for a matchless past glory, and for a nation whose unity had been shattered by its vernaculars. So the choice is very politicized. Right, something very, very interesting here. We've mentioned something about the meaning of ta'arif, Arabization according to Dr.Sameh. Same word, still being used by Khalil Gibran, but with a different meaning. For Dr.Sameh, it was all about domestication. For Khalil Gibran, it was about something else. So he does Arabize the name of the title here itself. So for the first time, we are given a name which sounds like Arabic. In some parts of the introduction, Khalil Gibran makes some assumptions that this must have been the name of the original title. Of course, he makes another radical assumption. He says that this is not Shakespeare's story. He must have read it in Arabic, either directly or in translation. He has taken that from us. And he must have deformed the pronunciation of the original Arabic name, and then he suggests the original name. It must have been Al-Alsun, and he anglicized, he deformed that into Othello. Yeah. These are very radical assumptions. Of course, unjustified, it doesn't provide much evidence. So he Arabizes the title here, and he Arabizes the plot, the story. He says, it's not his, it's ours. And when we Arabize, I'm only taking what was originally mine. So Arabization becomes an act of reclamation here. I'm just dispossessing the story. I'm taking it back into my own tradition. And then he even goes further, so Arabizing the title here, Arabizing the story, and then he Arabizes the author himself. Yes, he has a very nice statement to make about Shakespeare.
Shakespeare.
Yes. He says, in Shakespeare, and this is in the introduction, there is definitely something of an Arab. In all he writes in general, there is something Bedouin. Something that anchors itself to the free, genuine human instinct. So Arabization acquires a different meaning here. At the level of language, you can see that using the Arabic language as a means of political activism. Of course, we know the story. The story is all about a leader who comes from Moorish origins. He comes from kind of Arab origins. At one point, especially in scene 1, in Act 1, scene 2, this Arab leader is in encounter with members of the Venetian Senate. Yes? They are charging him with deception now, and they are telling him, well, that you have deceived Desdemona into marriage, and you need to defend yourself. I won't go into details here, but if you look at the language of Othello in this scene and in some other scenes, Khalid Mutwan was quite keen to give him a register which is much higher than the members of the Senate, the non-Arab leaders. Yeah? And remember his assumption about trying to unite the nation against colonialism, against colonizers. So we can skip. These are nice examples. I can give you a presentation later for the sake of time. For example, a quotation like this one. That's still in Act 1, Scene 3. Shakespeare says, most potent, grave, and reverend signors, he's talking to members of the Senate, my very noble and approved good masters. Yes? Mutran didn't like this condescending attitude on the part of the Senate. And this is how he translates that. And in order to see the significance of this translation, we need to put that in a contrasted perspective with another translation into Ammiya. I talked about that yesterday, and that's Mustafa Safwan's version, 1998. Mutran says, يا أولي الاقتدار والوقار سادة الأمجاد. And the word sadat is quite intriguing here. You could have said Asyari, which makes more sense. Sadati sounds more like misters than masters. So he compromises, he downgrades the tone of the word. Yeah? He calls them misters, which means they are seen on an equal footing. But the other one, the other version, Safwan's version, which is again a very politicized translation, I don't have time to talk about that. But he has quite an opposite view of Mutran's understanding of identity. And he really highlights the fact that Othello was in a very difficult position in front of the Senate. He was humiliated. So Safwan highlighted his humiliation. He said, يا أصحاب الأمر والشام عمير والمقام والمقام يلي نبلهم جعلني أرضاهم لنفسي أسياد. The use of the active voice here, أرضاهم لنفسي. My approved masters. We don't see that in Mutran. Because Mutran Othello is the icon of the Arab leader. You cannot see him in humiliating terms. Of course, Mutran, when he said that, just give me 5 minutes, I'm almost there. When he said that I'm going for the pre-Islamic Arabic as a register for the translation, he did have a political purpose. Yes? And he made that clear in the introduction. He said that my translation is meant to unite all Arabs coming from different backgrounds, coming from different ethnicities, because at the time there were Arabs coming from different ethnicities. One of them is a friend of Mutran, Ahmed Shawri, came from a Turkish background. Yes. And also, this is a translation which is meant to unite Arabs coming from different religions. Some people, when they write the history of pan-Arab secularism, they think of Mutran as one of the pioneers. He thought of this idea of secular pan-Arabism, a version of identity that is dissociated from religion and that unites all of us, regardless of the different backgrounds we come from. You can see that echoed in the translation, because using pre-Islamic Arabic, using a version which is not influenced by the language of the Quran and the Hadith. Yeah? It makes sense here. So he removed references to religions, heathen gods, Christian oaths, He removed negative references to ethnicities. A couple of examples. Very last scene, Desdemona now is accused of treachery, of treason. Othello says to her, "Are you a strumpet, Desdemona?" "No, as I'm a Christian." Translation, "Desdemona, لا الذي خلقني متقيا." In another scene, the Duke is talking to Othello about war and conflict. "Valiant Othello, you must straight impure you.